Coming up, Cory Sandhagen defeats Marlon Chito Vera in the main event of UFC San Antonio. The Sandman calls for a fight with top contender Merab Dvalishvili next. Colby Covington threatens UFC commentator Jon Anik. And to wrap things up, Cowboy Cerrone is inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame. My name is Frank Bonada. With me once again, it's Mohammad Sheikh. And we're here for the MMA stream, episode 2. Coming off the back of UFC San Antonio, Cory Sandhagen picks up a split decision win over Marlon Chito Vera. What do you make of that fight? What do you make of that card?
Yeah, I think the fight was pretty good. It could have been more exciting if Marlon Chito Vera could have done more. I felt like he was just a bit frozen in the fight. He wasn't in his groove the entire fight. And when he sort of started to pick up, it was a little too late for him, right? So, but props to Sandhagen. I think he did a fantastic job. He came out guns blazing, and it was the same throughout the fight, right? Throughout the whole 5 rounds, he was just on top of his game and never let Chito Vera get going the entire fight. Apart from the main event, Holly Holm still like at the top of the division. She made a point that she's not going anywhere. And what a great performance that was, right? She usually you expect a lot of striking from Holly Holmes and not a lot of grappling, but this time she sort of like displayed the other assets that she has in this game, and that was a ground game and total domination. And what a fantastic fight! All the other fights on the card were also great, but in general, like the entire fight card was pretty awesome. What did you make of it?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. It was at a reasonable time for the UK, so that makes it easier. But yeah, I think both the main event and co-main, Holm and Sandhagen, both fighters typically characterized by their striking, right? Both had real success with the ground game. The ground and pound from both Sandhagen and Holm at times was really quite devastating, racking them up like damage and control time at the same time. Really impressive stuff. And yeah, I mean, we spoke about this off camera, but Cory Sandhagen, it felt like, at least to me, that he had everything needed to beat someone with Chito Vera's skill set. Yes, he's super durable, but he's notoriously low output. He does hit hard. Sandhagen has an excellent chin. Sandhagen is very high output, has a huge variety of strikes that he can throw out. And he's got this wrestling game, the ground and pound. I thought it was a insanely complete performance from Sandhagen. He came into that fight with a bit of a chip on his shoulder. I don't think he was happy that Vera was ranked above him at the time. But he goes out there, gets the win, gets a split decision win. Not certain about that. In all honesty, yeah. I mean, Texas judges continue to live up to their reputation. Yeah, absolutely. A really impressive performance, though. What was your scorecard? How did you read it at the end?
Scorecard for sure. Like I had, I don't know, 30 to 29 for Sandhagen throughout the 5 rounds. I would say maybe round 3 and round 5 were like a little closer, but not. I would still give those to like Sandhagen. So like the split decision didn't make any sense at all to me.
No.
I think it was a complete washout Sandhagen show right there. So the split decision, not just to me and you, but to like everyone, like everyone's reaction was like, what? How can this ever be a split decision?
Even Dana White was saying it.
Yeah, even Dana White. Yeah.
But what's worth looking at is the judge that gave him that, gave Vera the fight. That was his, like, I think 5th high profile, or I think 5th fight full stop that he'd judged.
Oh, wow.
Back at it. Yeah, I saw, I can't remember which reporter it was now, but brought up his background, and he's very new to this. So I don't know if you can blame it on him or the board that put him as one of the judges for the most high profile fight of the evening. It all just seems a bit bizarre. But like I said before, Texas has this reputation for somewhat interesting judging.
Yeah.
And it continues living up to it.
Yeah, I guess I want to touch on the one of the points that you brought up for the main event and the co-main event, where like both the fighters are known for their striking, but then now sort of like displaying their grappling skills. And I think it's how the MMA like scene is evolving, right?
Yeah.
I think a lot of the fighters are now understanding that grapplers and wrestlers are sort of having the advantage and advancing more than just what the strikers are. So now they're really focusing on their wrestling game and grappling game a lot. And I think those improvements that were shown in what Sandhagen and Holly Holm were, able to do in the octagon, in terms of their wrestling and grappling. What do you make of it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, both Sandhagen and Holm, Holm's decorated boxer. Sandhagen had a kickboxing career before coming to MMA. And they're showing that they're not sort of defined by the sports that made up their past prior to MMA. They've really become both fully rounded martial artists. And yeah, it's great to see, especially for Sandhagen, right? Because like there's still so much potential for him there. Like he could go out and I would probably favor. I was going to say I favor him against Aljo, but I mean Aljo's already won once, but that was with the grappling. That was a couple of years ago now.
Yep.
Is he? I would be fascinated to see, but the fight that is next, it seems pretty certain already. Dana White's already hinted that this is the one to make. Merab Dvalishvili. Sandhagen calls him out.
Merab, you're hungry? Well, I got something for you to eat, and it don't taste good.
Which is a rare move from Cory Sandhagen, usually very reserved. It calls him out with a funny promo. Looks like that's the fight we've got next.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting one. Especially after given like Sandhagen's ground game improved so much. It's gonna be a very interesting one to see how that plays out.
I think a lot of people would have thought very differently of it if it weren't for that Merab performance against Piotr Jan recently, because wow, that was like, I mean, Jan beat Sandhagen. I know MMA math doesn't work like that, but he put a pretty comprehensive beating on Cory Sandhagen. So it's a fascinating fight. Has Sandhagen evolved enough that he can deal with the pressure wrestling of Merab? Merab has been knocked out once before by Ricky Simone. Is he capable of handling things with an elite striker like Sandhagen? I mean, fascinating matchup. Winner probably fights for a title.
Yeah, and I think it's more fascinating because Merab primarily was able to get the better of Jan because one, he had the pressure, but then two, he had that speed, which Jan wasn't able to like handle. But looking at the fight, Chito versus Sandhagen was so fast. Like he had that speed too, because like even when he was shooting for the takedowns, he wasn't really setting them up, but it was just his speed that was giving him so much success. And even though like he's so tall and lanky, right? But still like he was able to get those takedowns in, and it was just pure speed. So it would be nice to see how Merab's speed sort of plays out against Sandhagen's speed. It's a really great matchup in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And another one that really should be in a stadium with fans, because I thought the Texas fans really played a part in this card, which on paper wasn't the most stacked, but just having their presence there, especially like those opening flyweight fights, the crowd being there, it felt like it, spurred them on to put on some really entertaining performances.
Yeah. But let's take a look at maybe the what do you call it, the rankings and how this division is stacked up, right? I had a quick look at it, and I think everything's pretty well sorted out for a division, which usually doesn't happen that many often. There's always someone like left out there, but from what I saw, I could see Sean O'Malley, the only person who's like sort of like sitting out, but I think he has that sort of confirmation from the UFC that he would be fighting the winner of what do you call it, Cejudo and Sterling. So and then everyone else, if you sort of make the matchup of Sandhagen versus Merab, then it pretty much seems like everything's nicely sorted and everybody's like in a good position.
Yeah, it does line up pretty well. You're right. And the thing is, like, look who's number 4. It's Piotr Jan. Marlon Vera's just lost. They're both in need of a win. That's a fight to make right there as well. Like,
absolutely,
fan-friendly strikers. In fact, that's a really fun fight actually, because they're just gonna throw down. Both can fight for 5 rounds. I mean, people say bantamweight's the best division in the UFC right now. Do you agree with that sort of assumption?
I think it has sort of evolved a lot and became a very exciting division than what it used to be. I think it's sort of like in par with the lightweight division. I think the lightweight division is still there, right? It's always been the most exciting one. Most of the stars are there. Even if you like take Conor out of the picture, he's going to 170 now, but I still think it's stacked up, right? You still have Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje, Islam Makhachev, like just so many names out there. Oliveira, yeah. So many names out there, exciting fights. So yeah.
They're both really elite divisions that have a lot of exciting fights. I agree. There is something a little bit, I don't know what it is when you see a lightweight fight, an elite lightweight fight, like we got Beneil Dariush versus Oliveira coming up. I cannot wait for that fight.
Yep.
Oh my goodness. Anytime Oliveira fights, I just get excited because the man is just the embodiment of chaotic violence. But yeah, the
Beneil is that dark horse in that division.
Oh my goodness.
Like people don't talk about him enough, but that guy, man, like I really think I always thought that the person who can give the toughest time to like Islam Makhachev or like Khabib Nurmagomedov in that division was Beneil Dariush. Like because his defensive wrestling and his own grappling is like really good, and then he has that power in his hands, and his striking is absolutely amazing. So he's that dark horse in that division, in my opinion.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. Yeah, Dariush, he has that skill set that can trouble Makhachev the most, because if you think about guys like Poirier, like Gaethje, Khabib's already sort of mapped out how to beat those guys, and Makhachev has the skills to just follow that game plan and do it. But yeah, Dariush is that dark horse, that sort of unknown factor in the division. Really fascinating stuff.
And more so, like when I saw his fight against Gamrot, Gamrot is no joke wrestler, man. That guy is like intense pressure and just takedown after takedown and strong as hell. And he was just able to nullify everything Gamrot had for him, right? So that really made a point.
Yeah, 100%. He also out-wrestled Tony Ferguson for 3 rounds. I know people say Tony Ferguson is shot, but like that wouldn't really impact his grappling all that much. Tony Ferguson is known as being a very legitimate wrestler grappler. And Dariush didn't really strike with him. He did take advantage of his maybe slightly deteriorated chin. He just out grappled him. He nearly like broke his arm. But I mean, that's the thing though. Like, will Dariush get past Oliveira now? Because Oliveira is such a threat. He might just knock Dariush out, and we never even see the Makhachev fight. Once again, we've gone off on a tangent about another division that's not even related to the event. Coming back to one of the big news stories of the past week. So obviously Colby Covington was there in London. Dana White confirms that he gets the next title shot against Leon Edwards. And obviously the rest of the UFC welterweight division are not happy about that. Of course, Belal Muhammad was very vocal about that. Jon Anik is and his twin brother Jason Anik are both sort of known friends of Belal, and I don't even know if they actually said anything. It's just because association. Colby Covington gets on an interview with Mike Heck of MMA Fighting and straight up threatens UFC commentator Jon Anik on camera for everyone to see.
So you wanted to lick my freaking balls in London. Oh, Colby, this. But then you want to go back behind the stage and cheerlead for a racist. So he associates with racism and Belal Muhammad. And, Jon Anik, dude, I don't want your kids to grow up without a dad. Just realize you live in Boca. I live in Miami, motherfucker. You're not too far from me. So you better shut your fucking mouth. You poke the bear. Now you get the bear comes after you.
Now, I know Covington plays this character and he does some crazy antics and stuff. And fair enough to an extent if you're building a fight. I don't agree with the stuff he said about Masvidal's children and whatnot. He crossed the line with Usman a couple of times, but that's all promoting a fight. It's all justifiable from the UFC's perspective because it's a business move. It's helping to sell their product. But when he's actively threatening a UFC employee, one of the most sort of beloved UFC employees. I don't understand how they can let him get away with it, and yet it seems like they are.
Yeah, so I think one point to make there is Bilal actually came to, I think Jason, actually it's their own podcast, right?
Yeah.
So that's where like Jason was sort of like taking the side of Bilal and making the point that, hey, Bilal deserves the next title shot and it shouldn't be Colby. And I think Jon Anik did send out a tweet or something like that. I don't remember exactly, but he also supported that, Bilal should be the guy next in line. And what I've noticed is like ever since the Leon Edwards and Usman fight and Dana sort of announcing that Colby's next, whoever is saying the opposite, like trying to say like Colby doesn't deserve this or is someone else who should be, next in line for the title shot. And that guy's in a position, or that person is in a position where like he has a large following and people sort of care about what he has to say. Colby's been pushing really hard against those people, right? Colby, I think Colby needs more antics than just going after the fighter that he's been, he's about to be fighting, and he's really like pushing hard and trying to make himself appear on the scene by just commenting or sort of like not contradicting, but like commenting on anyone who has to say anything against him having the next title shot against Leon Edwards. Obviously, he plays that character. Everybody knows by now that he's playing that character. That's not who he is, and I don't think he means any of that, right? In order for him to actually be fighting for that title shot, he needs to remain on the good books of Dana White, and Dana White loves Jon Anik for sure. Everybody knows that, right? So whatever he's doing is just part of the act. I know it's sort of like going off boundaries and he shouldn't be doing that, but I really think that this is just part of his act. What do you think about it?
I know, I think it is, but I don't know, man. Like stuff like this is what it's not a positive thing towards the sport. Like maybe it drives some numbers, and that's the thing. That's why Colby's getting the title shot when he probably doesn't really deserve it. Let's be honest. It's because in the welterweight division, he probably is the biggest pay-per-view draw right now, I think.
Agreed. Yeah.
Having said that, I do feel like Masvidal, if he beats Gilbert Burns, do Edwards versus Masvidal in London. Hell, do it in a stadium. That would be a huge draw.
I totally agree. I think
the UFC are probably banking on Burns beating Masvidal.
But it's a good argument. Like I've strongly felt that Colby shouldn't be the person that should be fighting for the title. It should be somebody else, like Bilal Mohammad or somebody else, right? If you're not talking about like drawing numbers and just looking at how things play out in the rankings. But someone asked the question, Dana White, in the press conference yesterday, and the question was like, Dana, like people are saying that Colby doesn't deserve this title shot. So like, why do you, what do you have to say to those people? And Dana was like, this is not even a question, right?
Yeah.
Colby's deserving of it. And he asked he counter questioned that why should he not, right? He was injured, or like he had his case with Jorge Masvidal, and that's why he was sitting out. But before that, he was on a winning streak. He was at the top of the rankings, right? So how do you sort of like what's the counter argument to that, to say that Colby is not deserving of the title shot? And at that moment in time, I was like, he has a point there, right?
Yes and no. But also, like, his past 3 wins are Masvidal, Woodley, and Robbie Lawler. And like, come on, like they don't stack up. Like Bilal's recent wins are ones that I know he's not a pay-per-view draw, but they do stack up their modern wins against top 15 opposition.
Agree.
Shavkat Rakhmonov just beat Jeff Neal in a fight of the year contender. Hell, Gilbert Burns, if he beats Masvidal, he's a fighter who's already in the top 5. Why the hell not? Like, I don't know. I guess the big issue is the fact that Khamzat Chimaev is moving. We've discussed this last week, but Khamzat Chimaev is moving up in the weight. He would be a clear number one contender, having already beaten Burns.
Yeah.
But we're losing one of the top 5 to a different weight class. So, yeah, it's just a shame there isn't a clear-cut contender, because I don't think Colby's deserving of it. But like you say, there is a relatively decent case to be made in his favor, especially from a business perspective. So
Yeah.
what can you do?
Yeah, I think that's what it is. And Dana, I think, plans on feeding Bilal to Shafkat.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah.
But you never know, man. I don't know how that fight is. I mean, I think I know how that fight is gonna play out, but I also thought how Sean Brady versus Bilal was gonna play out, but it
Right.
did not play out that way. It was entirely different. So maybe
Yeah.
Bilal has evolved, like working with Habib and the guys in that camp, and he can, I don't know, pull something off against Shafkat
Maybe.
if
That's
that happens.
that's such a tough fight though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if he wins that fight, he's like the people's champ, in my opinion, there.
The uncrowned welterweight champion.
He's definitely gonna get following for sure.
Yeah.
Like, people are gonna have mad respect for that.
The thing is though, his route to victory is probably a horrendous snooze fest where he just like holds out in like full guard.
Yeah,
And man's like body head.
but he really can't do that easily with Shafkat, because he has a
True.
ground game. So it's not gonna be an easy route.
Yeah, that's very true. I don't know. Last thing on this, I just really think there should be some level of repercussions for Covington for threatening a UFC commentator, because it's no longer the sport then, is it? You know, imagine if this happened in NFL or Premier League football or anything like that. That a ban and a fine would be the smallest of punishments. You know, there could be way, I don't know. It's things like these that give me the disconnect of MMA as a sport from all the rest of the sort of like the premier sports in the world right now. Stuff like this goes on and there's no follow-up.
Yeah, I feel the same. But then, like, when these sort of questions are asked to Dana, he goes like,
Yeah.
This is the game we're in, right? People get in there and punch each other in the face. Like, what do you expect, right? And then he has this counter argument there.
I feel like that's a philosophy that was relevant back in Dana's heyday when he was like really driving the UFC up on that sort of wave of success. When it went from sort of almost hidden underground sport to entering the sort of semi-mainstream. But now that it is getting more legitimate, I feel like that sort of way of thinking is going to hold the sport back to an extent.
Yeah, I think there's the different type of audiences. Like there's an audience that are like me and you, who are not okay with this, but then there's an audience who actually
just
love
bleed.
that. They're just looking for that drama, and I think there's a lot of them. I don't know. This can become a really big topic, right? Like, you can start talking about what's moral, what's morality, how do you define that in MMA and all of that stuff. And I don't think we want to go down there, right?
No,
So
that's a full podcast for another day, maybe.
Yep.
Well, to wrap things up then, let's talk about something positive. We have another Hall of Fame inductee. Last week it was Anderson Silva, and now Donald Cowboy Cerrone in Texas. He didn't even know it was coming. He's there in the crowd, and his wife and kids come out all wearing the cowboy hats, and you can see how much it meant to him. Immediately breaks down. Well, not breaks down, but you can see the emotion across his face. He's tearing up, and I mean, I don't know. I've seen people online criticizing it, being like, well, he never won anything. He was never much more than like a top tier journeyman. But I mean, like, if you watch Cowboy Cerrone over the years, he was so much more than that. He was the lightweight and welterweight for a bit action fighter. He was put on an entertaining fight every single time. He would fight like 4 or 5 times a year, compete in the UFC and WEC. I mean, the man completely deserves to be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, for sure, no doubt about it. I think whoever says he doesn't deserve is just a hater. Nothing more than that. or some casual fan who doesn't know like the history of what Cowboy Cerrone brought to the UFC. You don't always have to be a champion and someone who's like sort of defended that title so many times and stacked up too many records, but actually Don Cerrone is a person who has stacked up so many records.
Yeah.
Right. Most finishes, most wins, most I don't know what. Like he has so many of those mosts in the UFC, and like you said, like always there to fight. Short notice fights, 4 or 5 times, 3, 4 times every year, and every fight would be an amazing fight. There would never be a snooze fest, right? There would be some fights where he wouldn't show up as he would like to, and wouldn't go in his favor, but then every time he brought the action, right? I can remember so many of his like action-packed fights. It's just incredible, like what he brought to the table, and inside and outside the octagon, right? Like a complete adrenaline junkie, like doing some crazy things outside the octagon as well, right? So if you follow his life, he's just an amazing fighter, and I think well deserved for the Hall of Fame there.
Yeah, I agree. Michael Bisping on commentary read out his like opponents over the past few years, not even the past like decade, and it's just like elite. It's like top 5 fighters, but for the past like like 10, 15 years, however long he's been at the top of the sport, and just non-stop. So yeah, I'm glad he got his he got that moment, because that seemed like it really meant something to him, and it was good to see. I think that just about sort of wrap things up for this week. No UFC next week, is a week off, but we do have Masvidal's weird hybrid boxing event. We've got Anthony Pettis versus Roy Jones Jr. We've got Jose Aldo versus Jeremy Stevens, Jacare Souza versus Vitor Belfort. And there's also PFL, Brendan Loughnane. People in the UK are very high on this man because he's just coming off winning it last year. He's taking on Marlon Moraes. Bunch of other former UFC fighters on there. Thiago Silva's on there. Rob Wilkinson, Christoph Jotko, and that's just off the top of my head. I'm sure there's more in the mix. So even though there's no UFC, there's still content to go over. But for now, I think that's all for us today.
Yep, sounds good. I think we'll pull something together for next week from the content that you just mentioned. So we'll keep this rolling.
Yes, sir, absolutely. Subscribe and tune in next week.
Yep.
Boom, boom.